Hi, you're on the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It is Sunday night, February 11. I hesitate because last week I called it February 3rd all night long, and it wasn't. But I know that this is the 11th. We're looking at some things that have happened in the world under the political umbrella. Israel this week retaliated for an Iranian drone that penetrated their airspace from Syria. They retaliated with a barrage of Israeli airstrikes on Iranian and Syrian targets in Syria. Syria responded with heavy anti-aircraft fire that set off multiple warning sirens in Israel and managed to shoot down one of Israel's F-16s. It came down in Israeli territory. The pilots ejected. Both were injured. They're both in the hospital. One is seriously injured. Israel's response to this attack was immediate. As soon as these drones came in, they launched a number of aircraft against the places where these might have been launched. They did this in what is being called the strongest attack in 30 years. Israel destroyed 4 Syrian command posts, 8 Iranian command posts, all of which are in Syria, and all of the fighters returned home from this mission safely. This from Christians United for Israel, John Hagee Ministries. In a little interesting and ornery twist of fate, the global trading market was turned on its head in the last few weeks when an oil tanker showed up in the UAE, we call it Saudi Arabia, with crude oil. Can you imagine sending crude oil to Saudi Arabia? Well, apparently it came from Texas. The Texas condensate, a type of crude oil, a very light crude oil, a crude oil that's preferred to what the Arab region or the Middle East region has to offer, a superior quality. So we now have the Saudis buying oil from us. It's possible it's always been going on, but I think it's sort of a little benchmark, a little sign somewhere along the line. I know a lot of you don't follow the stock market, but if you listen to the news, you get a paper, you get emails, you get any kind of information from your friends, you know that the stock market plunged 1,600 points in 1 week. Actually, it did it in 1 day. The news on Monday morning was the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 1,175 points. You see, it dropped 1,600, but before the day was out, it was already coming back. This registers its worst single-day points drop in history. And the pundits and others couldn't resist it. They went crazy. And this is coming on the heels of the previous Friday's 666-point loss. That number was not lost on many observers. It was really 66.5 or 66.7 or something like that, but they rounded it up for effect. They claim that the Dow's gains for the year have now been erased. Oh my. Markets are lower in Europe and Asia as well. Analysts predicted a short-term correction, but by the end of the week, the rally had really turned down one more time. And experts are saying this is probably a short-term correction, or it may be a sign of more declines to come. But the recent plunge may already be affecting our health as well as our wealth. During the Great Depression, online searches for stomach ulcer symptoms and headaches increased 228% and 193%. When was the Great Recession? Oh, that was in 2008. Check it out. Responding to a recession. See what you find. Hopefully you'll find my podcast. It'll be a video on the Facebook and on the website, but it hopefully will turn up in iTunes podcast if I can figure out how to get it to work. Dr. Henry Kissinger was interviewed by CBS Face the Nation last summer. We talked about it a little bit, but it's good to rehearse. His evaluation of President Trump was what stands out in this interview, and it must have blown the CBS people right out of their seat. He started with, quote, "Donald Trump is a phenomenon that foreign countries haven't seen," end of quote. He said liberals and all those who favor Clinton will never admit it. They will never admit that he is the one true leader. The man is doing changes like never before and does all of it for the sake of this nation's people. After 8 years of tyranny, Kissinger, after 8 years of tyranny, talking about the Obama administration, we finally see a difference. One would have to ask the question, why is this article being run again? Why are we being told about it now again? It may be that it just wasn't very widely distributed the first time around. Kissinger went on to say every country now has to consider two things. One, their perception that the previous president or the outgoing president basically withdrew America from international politics so that they had to make their own assessments of their necessities. And secondly, that there is a new president who's asking a lot of unfamiliar questions. He continued by saying, because of the combination of the partial vacuum and the new questions, one could imagine that something remarkable and new emerges out of it. How about that? One new thing that's emerging is Stockton, California, a town in California, if you're not familiar with it. The mayor of Stockton is leading an experiment with what he calls, quote, universal basic income, end of quote. He is getting set to start this thing by giving low-income residents $500 a month. No questions asked. Not a salary, largesse. Mayor Michael Tubbs calls his city ground zero for issues like wage stagnation, rising housing prices, loss of middle-class jobs that affect the nation. This Central Valley city went bankrupt in 2012, and for decades it has been trying to diversify its agricultural-based economy. The mayor said, I feel that as mayor, it's my responsibility to do all I could to begin figuring out what's the best way to make sure that folks in our community have a real economic floor, basis upon which to stand. In addition to tracking what residents do with the money, Mayor said he would be monitoring how a basic income affects things like self-esteem and identity. What does it mean, he says? Here is unconditional guaranteed income just based on you being a human being. The hope here is to demonstrate the potential of this universal basic income, or UBI as it's being called, and to encourage other places to give it a try. UBI has recently gotten a boost from Silicon Valley moguls concerned about income inequality and the future of society, but the idea isn't actually all that new, said Michael Anderson, a Stanford law professor. Karl Marx tried it too. Some of us were saddened in the last week learning that Trey Gowdy is now planning to resign from office. Trey Gowdy is a representative from South Carolina, not this county, up in the high country. He said when interviewed, "I tried." He said it's about winning in politics, and that is not what the courtroom is all about. He says there's a reason we throw out search warrants even though we find the murder weapon. There's a reason we throw out confessions even though we think the person did it. Because the process matters. The end does not justify the means, and in politics, it's just about winning. In his retirement, Gowdy said he plans to return to the justice system. We wish him well, although we could wish that he might choose something else that would be of greater value internationally. I'm just saying.